Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for the Association of Lloyd's Brokers Mergers and Acquisitions Seminar. We're happy to have all of you with us this morning. We'll get kicked off here in just a moment, but I wanted to start with a little bit about the Association of Lloyd's Brokers. We are a group that offers education, information, and business networking opportunities linking the membership to the Lloyd's market. You're in for a real treat today with our Mergers and Acquisitions Seminar. And with this, I'd like to kick this over to my colleague, Tanja.
Thank you so much, Mary. Good morning, everybody. Here we go. There's a short delay here with the video. Okay, that seems to be working. That's great. Thank you again, Association of Lloyd's Brokers, Mary Mullen, Mark Rector, and our illustrious panel this morning. We have Jeff Barlow, who's our General Counsel and Corporate Secretary for Momentive Technologies. Thank you, Jeff. Good morning.
Morning.
Diane Bell, partner at the Ice Miller law firm here in Chicago. Jason Freiman from Beazley. He's a team leader and underwriter in the M&A, Cyber, and Executive Risk Unit. And MaryAnne Swaim, my colleague from the Hylant Mergers and Acquisition Transaction Solutions team, who are going to help me lead a conversation over the next 2.5 hours around M&A, best practices, reps and warranties, insurance, etc. I'll touch on a few housekeeping items for just a few minutes, if you would. You've already seen the first chat from Mark Rector. Periodically, he will be sending you links in the chat so you can obtain your CE credit, which has been filed for the states of Illinois, Wisconsin, and Ohio. So keep an eye on the chat. In addition, Mark will help us monitor the chat room for any questions. This is a panel. Our illustrious speakers are well-versed and happy to have questions come through the chat room at any moment in time, and Mark will interrupt and bring the questions forward. So absolutely feel free to participate. We all have been on a Zoom overload for the last 1.5 years, and so we understand that this is a time commitment, and whatever we can do to make this educational and fun, we'll try to do so. We do have some slides prepared just so that it's a visual. The slides will be made available on the website after the event. And feel free to contact any one of us through either Mark Rector or Link to Lloyd's. We're all happy to have conversations. So I think with that, we can jump right in. Let's go to the first slide, Mark, if you don't mind. So as a moderator, I just wanted to kind of set the tone for the panel. I was preparing for another conference this week, and I found this statistic quite meaningful. We all know that 2019 was a stellar year for M&A, and then COVID hit, and we saw a little bit of a drop in the early part of 2020. What I find interesting on this slide is that you can see the rebound in M&A activity, especially fourth quarter 2020 in the US. That rebound was amazing. Not the same when it comes to global trends. So if you look at the bottom graph, you can see that the outside of the US, M&A actually did not pick up to the same level as 2019. By the end of 2020. So that was an interesting dichotomy to me when I was researching for this panel. And part of that, I think, is due to the fact that, the US made a concerted effort, more so perhaps than other countries, to make sure the Fed's keeping the interest rates low, the government loans, the PPPs, all of that financial support came fairly early on in the US market, and that allowed then for capital to rebound and for M&A activity to rebound, I think, a little faster. Another interesting fact I thought I'd share, and then I'll ask for perspectives from others, is that the US, the number of deals that occurred in the US in 2020 was about 4,700. versus the largest foreign country outside of the US was the UK with 775 deals, according to Statista.com. And after the US and UK, it's France, China, Canada, Germany, and Japan. We have definitely seen a reduction in Chinese FDI, foreign direct investment, outside of China in the last 2 years. And another statistic I'm just going to quote that I found interesting was that the Chinese M&A activity in the last couple of years has been 93% focused on within China or within APAC. Rather than outside of China. And that was an interesting factoid for me. Mark, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you so much. Another interesting fact, and some of this comes from the Bain and Company report, so that has been posted online, along with a couple of other interesting articles from our panelists. So feel free to take a look at those articles, download them, and reach out. Another interesting fact that I wanted to share, and this is just 2020 to 21 activity, is this trend towards mega deals, right? And, we've all heard about them. The largest one is S&P buying IHS Markit as of February 2021. I didn't look at the most recent activity. Clearly, Aon Willis Gallagher is very pertinent to our industry. That was just announced in the last few weeks. But what we're trying to say here, what I'm trying to convey with this slide is that the majority of the deals, if you want to just kind of, according to Bain, segment, have been either called scope deals, where we're talking about the mega mergers, consolidation, globalization, being first. And that trend is generally more in the healthcare, in the tech, and in the consumer products industries. So for example, Target, as a result of the pandemic, deciding to buy a delivery service business called Deliv, or Nestle deciding to buy a more fresh, healthy meal preparation company called Freshly, or some of the banking industries consolidating just to be that number 1, 2, 3 market share position. So PNC, BBVA in the US, Bankia and Caixa in Spain, Intesa and UBI in Italy. So the scope deals are clearly shown on this chart. And then the second kind of deals that we've seen that have led some of these mega mergers are scale deals. When we're talking about the examples I just mentioned, where we're looking at trying to get into new markets, new products, new customers. So the Target, for example, getting into the delivery or the fresh foods. And certainly it's been interesting. I know everybody has read articles on the beauty products industry doing really well during a pandemic. So that was an interesting factoid that I thought I would share. Digitalization has really helped with M&A activity. And that means that deals are being done faster. They're being done virtually. They're being done, and I'm going to jump into the next slide. I think they're being done, and MaryAnne will comment on this, with multiples that are very high compared to a couple of years ago. So MaryAnne, I'm going to ask you to jump in. Tell us a little bit more about the state of the M&A industry.
Yeah, there's a lot, there's a lot of money circulating, and also just, they call it dry powder, money that's on the sidelines that's available for a deal if the deal looks attractive. And as we saw in the first 2 slides, everything was going very well into Q1 of last year, and then it just, with COVID, everything hit the skids. So normally there's around 28,500 deals that transact for M&A in the US, and that just, went dormant. Nothing, nearly nothing got done in April or May of last year, and it started coming up in June. So a lot of rethinking. Do people want to invest in real estate? Do they want to invest in retail? Do they want to go toward e-commerce? So a lot of change in what they're looking at and how much they want to spend for it has taken place. The two largest groupings of capital would be private equity. So they, gather capital and they make investments as they see fit and return profits to their investors. And the others would be strategic, somebody who is in the paint manufacturing business. Maybe they want to buy another paint manufacturing company. Or as Tanja said, they're in grocery or Target and they want to have another delivery arm or something. So the strategics also make the investments, and each one has a different investment design and what they'll pay for companies that they're interested. It's the old make or buy. And if it looks attractive, they've got the capital to make the purchases. And it has really keyed up again in Q4 of 2020, all the way through current conditions. It is a frothy market. There are a lot of deals underway. And some of that, as Tanja alluded to, is driven by tax, it's driven by opportunity, and it's driven by who's for sale. And very much like housing today, a lot of folks are putting houses on the market because they can get a good price for it. So that drives it as well. So there are a lot of companies up for sale and a lot of buyers. Next, please. Ebitda, so earnings before interest and tax. So you can see here financial companies, which basically would be the private equity, because they have a different model than strategics. So a lot of times the PE firms are driving a harder bargain. They'll pay a less robust multiple. And the strategics are saying, we know what to do with it. And because it's what we already do, this line of business, we'll pull in another company, we'll pay a little bit more, but we know that synergistically will drive a lot of efficiencies in the purchase, and therefore they'll likely pay a higher multiple. So you can see on average, it's around an 8 multiple if you take both PE and strategics. And that's a good number if you're selling, and that's just where the market is if you're buying. Next, please. Jeff, I think.
Oh, okay. I'm Jeff Barlow. I'm the General Counsel at Momentive Technologies. And, Momentive Technologies, we make quartz and ceramics products that go into semiconductors. So we help the semiconductors make their chips. And as you've seen, I'm sure there is a chip shortage out there, which is certainly driving demand and also driving acquisitions in the semiconductor and the manufacturers that support them. Before that, I was a general counsel at Swaim, and before that, I was an M&A lawyer in the law department at Eaton Corporation. When I was at Eaton, we were very acquisitive. We would look at 10 to 14, or we would look at about 40 deals a year, and we would close between 10 to 14 deals a year, mostly on the buy side, some on the sell side. And when you're looking to put your deal team together, obviously it's going to start with, if you have a corporate development group, depending on the size of the group, those are usually the ones driving the deals, or the various business units who have relationships. So if it's a strategic deal, the business unit leaders and their business development teams typically have those relationships. And a lot of acquisitions happen that way over relationships that have been developed over 10 to 20 years. But if it's through the corporate development group, that could be coming through brokers. It could be coming through relationships that they have as well. And then that deal team would then involve typically the law department, the corporate development group, this initial kind of core team or clean team. It can be referred to as both. Typically the clean team is that these are the only people that are going to know inside the company, because a deal or a potential deal is at such an early stage. So that typically is going to be your CEO, CFO, typically the general counsel or someone else in the law department. And then maybe some of the technology people on your technology teams. A lot of acquisitions for us, whether I was at Eaton or Swaim or now at Momentive Technologies, it's all about buying the technology, because it's difficult to develop new technology and it's so much faster to acquire technology through an acquisition. So you'll have some of those technology leaders involved to analyze the target and their intellectual property. Diane?
Hello, I'm Diane Bell. I'm a partner at Ice Miller, and I'm an M&A attorney in an outside law firm. And much like Jeff is here really to represent the buy side, because that's what the bulk of what he's been doing lately. I sit on both sides of the transactions, but I'm here to talk more about the sell side a little bit. So if a company decides that maybe it's time to put themselves on the block, how does that look and how does that work? So first, they assemble the deal team, as Jeff just described. And it's pretty similar on the sell side, although they don't have to worry about integration. So they get to cut that piece of it out. Typically, they'll engage an investment bank who will do a lot of the work of finding potential buyers for them. And then they'll do a lot of the kind of the busy work, if you will. So managing the potential buyers, having them sign non-disclosure agreements. Once it gets a little further down the road, sometimes they'll do some of the negotiating. They'll often do a lot of the financial negotiations, especially if the sellers aren't really sophisticated enough to do it themselves, or maybe this is the first time they've been through a sale process. So if a potential target is lucky enough to have multiple buyers, often there will be a round of what's known as indications of interest, where a buyer will say, I'm very interested in your company. I think it's worth between, let's call it 100 and 120 million. So I'm going to continue doing my diligence, including my financial diligence. But I think that's the range where my bid will ultimately come in once I know more about your company. Management presentations are then put together where management of the target will talk about their business and, really sell themselves and why they're so great. And it gives the potential buyers a chance to get to know the management company or the management of the company and to ask questions. There's also usually some limited diligence during this period. Often they'll do what's called a Q of E, which is a quality of earnings, which is hugely important really for all parties. It forms kind of the basis of most of the financials that are going to be baked into the deal. And it also gives the buyer a fair amount of comfort that the earnings are legitimate and not just a fluke.
Yeah, so Diane, on the buy side, right, once we get through that quality of earnings, we'll know whether our price is right, and we'll know for the most part, except for a few things that could still come up in diligence, but we'll also know as sort of a stage gating process, are we even going to move forward from here? Because a lot of times if the quality of earnings doesn't prove out, we're going to drop out of the deal right then.
That's right. So letters of intent come in at some point along the way, and where that fits in with the quality of earnings varies a little bit deal to deal. But at some point, it comes down to just one buyer, and they'll enter into a letter of intent, usually just with one person, and usually the letter of intent will include exclusivity provisions. And if it's an auction process, typically the seller will have their attorneys put together a draft purchase agreement. It's often egregiously seller favorable, and then they'll ask the buyers to mark up that agreement as part of their final bids. And the reason for that is really, the sellers are trying to get the best deal that they possibly can. And they may be willing to trade dollars for better terms. Although I rarely have seen someone take better terms over more dollars. Then there is in-depth due diligence, both on the financial side, also the legal side. There's a lot of integration talks, looking into systems. I suspect Jeff will touch on that more later, as that's more of a buy-side issue. But essentially, the company who's acquiring them, especially if it's a strategic, they need to make sure that all the systems will work together post-closing. And if they need to, move someone to another system, that takes some planning. So all of those things take place around this time.
Yeah, Diane, along those lines, so there, we talked about the deal team on the previous slide, but in that moment, once that letter of intent is signed, the deal team grows substantially. So then you're bringing in HR, you're bringing in probably tax and finance and insurance and risk, and whether those are insourced or outsourced, depending on the size of your company and the capacity within your company to handle that. You're probably bringing on outside law firm. You probably already brought on an outside accounting firm to help dive through and prepare the quality of earnings. And then, yes, a lot of that it's uncovering the issues that the company may have, that the target may have, and that ultimately may factor into price. But it will be key to later in the discussion on reps and warranties and what indemnity may look like. But then on top of that, you are also exploring that integration piece, and costs related to integration go into your overall model that you've built out, that you've been building out throughout this process. And so what will it take to run this target once you've acquired it? What will the run rate be? And does that fit? And how does that look with price? Because then again, you may make a decision that it's not worth moving forward. At the same time, you do start some of that integration planning, and systems, as Diane mentioned, is a huge thing. So let's say your company works off of SAP as the enterprise resource management software. Those are huge undertakings, and the target works off of Oracle. Those two systems are not going to really jive together going forward. And so you then know you've got a big SAP implementation in front of you for the target, and that increases the cost substantially. That's just one example to throw out there.
And so at this point in the process, both sides come together from the legal side to negotiate the purchase agreement. And what that consists of largely is, it contains who's doing what to whom, what they're buying, whether it's assets, stock, if it's a merger. Pardon me. There are reps and warranties, which we'll talk about in more depth in a little bit. There are indemnity provisions in most agreements. There are covenants, which is just a legal word for a promise to do something in the future. And sometimes there are things called earnouts, which are really just a mechanism to bridge a pricing gap. So what an earnout usually is, and they can take a lot of various forms, is if some sort of metric is hit post-closing, then the sellers will get additional cash. And so that can be anything from a patent is granted to earnings post-closing will be X. It can be on a sliding scale. It can be a flat fee. Really, they're only limited by your imagination.
Yeah, financial incentives for performance of the target company.
That's
drives behavior and drives bottom line contribution.
And litigation.
Oh, yes, yes. We're seeing more of both. We're seeing more of both, yes.
Diane and Jeff, when we were talking, we also talked about talent and retention and, clauses relating to that, so maybe you can chime on some of that as well.
Sure. So, it's key for the buyers to make sure that key management sticks around post-closing. So that can be done in a handful of ways. Oftentimes there will be an employment agreement required in connection with closing for key management. Sometimes key management will get equity incentive grants to really make sure that their interests are aligned with those of the buyer. They can put bonus plans in place, but as MaryAnne so succinctly put it, often there are dollars tied to, stick around and do good things. Stay bonuses are another way to do that. So yeah, there are a myriad of ways to incentivize management to stick around and do good work.
What is the typical? Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I just want to say, some companies have a philosophy that they don't really want the management once they've purchased the target. And so it all depends on who's the acquirer. And then in other situations, it's also a key part of diligence, where you want to interview some of those key players at the target and decide, do we want them to come, and then, or do we really absolutely need them? And then we're going to make sure that they're a condition to close. So you may have 3 or 4 key employees that are listed in the closing conditions that they are coming with the transaction and they've agreed to.
Good points. Yeah. I was going to actually ask around the benefits of reps and warranties, and we've all hinted at that. So Diane, why don't you finish the deal progression, and then we'll chime in with that, if that's okay.
Sure, of course. So at this point, it's time to sign the purchase agreement. Sometimes that's done at the same time as the closing. Sometimes there's a gap in between the two. When there's a gap, it's often, but not always, in order to get some sort of approval, whether that's regulatory approval. Hart-Scott-Rodino is a type of antitrust approval that's required for deals of a certain size, or if there are other antitrust concerns. Sometimes, you need customer consent under a contract. Sometimes you need a little bit of time in order for the buyer to line up financing. A lot of deals are done simultaneous signing close. Sometimes there's a gap. Neither one is wrong. Both work for different circumstances. Something that we're seeing a lot of these days are if a company has a PPP loan that's outstanding, and it hasn't been forgiven yet, then the funds that were borrowed plus all accrued interest need to go into an escrow prior to a change of control transaction. And the threshold for a change of control transaction is, I would argue, not really a change of control. So there's a 20% threshold. So to the extent that there is significant movement in the ownership base going on, need to explore that. And so then it comes time to close the transaction and integrate.
How long, and Jeff and Diane, you might answer this first, and then maybe others can chime in. How long is your typical deal, and how has the things we've talked about recently changed that deal time frame?
Yeah, sure. I'll take it from the buy side. Well, first we'll provide the standard lawyer answer, which is it depends. But it can range from 3 to 4 weeks to where you've got a seller who's really prepared, has already done. They can already have completed their own sort of seller due diligence, where they've hired a vendor who's done all that due diligence for them, and so it's really easy to do a lot of the due diligence through that. And then you've got a motivated buyer or buyers who, this is a target that they really want to acquire, so that can happen really fast. There are other deals that, they've taken close to a year, and sometimes that's about the closing conditions. I can think of a few deals that I've done in the past where there were some very key permits that needed to happen that the target never operated with. But knowing that a foreign buyer was going to buy this target, we knew that those permits would be looked at and enforced. And so we put it on the seller to get those. And sometimes there are those regulatory approvals. So whether it's antitrust or, in the US, there's CFIUS as well. So foreign investment around some kind of key technology or key defense article. Those approvals can take some time, and you can get second requests. And those second requests are a more in-depth look by the regulatory agency into the transaction. And so, you've even seen with when AT&T acquired Time Warner, that went to court. And so, you don't want to close and then have to unwind. So you will delay the closing until those things happen.
That's a great answer. Thanks, Jeff. Diane, anything else to add to that?
No, Jeff nailed it.
Okay. So I appreciate us kind of laying the land here in terms of who's involved with the deal team and the time frame and the typical steps. We've hinted at reps and warranties insurance and bringing the insurance broker in. So let's go there. So MaryAnne, why don't we start with you first, and then we'll move to Jason. I think that we know as brokers, the sooner the better, but when is the right time to involve a broker into the insurance, into the due diligence phase? And Jeff hinted at it as well. So I'll let you kind of take that one.
And I'll just also say, I'm MaryAnne Swaim. I work with Hylant with Tanja, and I run our rep and warranty merger and acquisition desk. So I see a lot of rep and warranty, and that is a very often asked question, when to get the broker involved and when to truly consider rep and warranty and what does it cover. So optimally, we as broker like to be involved at the letter of intent stage. So when there's a seriousness by the buyer looking at the target, and 98, 99% of the placements that are made for rep and warranty are made by the buyer. So the company that's acquiring the target. And so a lot of the overview would be, what does it cover? Well, rep and warranty is one of those where if anything is known, it does not qualify for rep and warranty insurance coverage protection. If it's already known, then the willing buyer and the willing seller need to work that out, whether that's in the purchase agreement or pricing or carve out. And a really easy one on that is if there's a pollution situation that needs to be treated specifically, get environmental protection for that. So as it says here, known issues are not covered. You can't go and buy coverage to protect against something that you already have knowledge about. That would be that's outside the norm, and it would be fraud. So known issues need to be treated. Purchase price adjustments, covenants, et cetera, that all gets worked out. And as Diane stated, there'll be a preliminary or the first draft of the purchase agreement document by the buyer or the seller, and the other party looks at it, and it probably goes through normally 4 or 5 turns with each party making adjustments in both the scope of the wording and perhaps on pricing or terms, conditions, give and take. So that's what happens there. So what does it cover? It covers breaches. So a representation is a statement of facts, and it says we as the seller represent, and there are representations for both the buyer and the seller. So what the seller will say is, we have the authority to conduct this purchase. The financial information we're presenting to you is correct. The list of material contracts and customers is correct. You can count on that stuff going forward when you consider what you want to pay for us. And think of that as most of us are in insurance. What's your contact list? What's your customer base? How many of the renewals stay with you? So, that the other side could sit there and say, then I will pay fair value or full value or a discounted price. Based on what we think the expectation of forward sales are going to be. So those are the representations. If it turns out that some of that is incorrect, it can be incorrect because of fraud and lying, or it can be incorrect because somebody didn't really dig deeply enough to come up with the true facts of the matter. And on that latter portion where, even though there was diligence, if there was something that wasn't quite correct, that's where rep and warranty policy can provide protection to the purchaser of the policy, which, as we stated earlier, is 99% of the time the buyer in the deal transaction.
Thanks, MaryAnne. Jason, would you like to jump in and maybe Mark advance the slides? Thank you.
Oh, and on the other, there's always going to be, on any insurance policy, there's always some baked in exclusions. So, underfunding of pension plans is not covered. Net operating losses are not covered. It's there for the deal specifics of this transaction.
And maybe Jason's got a little bit of technical difficulty, so just continuing. Jason, you there? Okay, there we go.
Very good.
We can see you. I think you're live, Jason. Maybe not. Okay, we'll give him 1 minute. I was going to chime in. So I've worked with multinationals, and what MaryAnne just stated is labor contracts, underfunded pensions. Often there's issues with, especially in Europe, sometimes those labor contracts will go back decades, and that often is a trigger for a reps and warranty coverage because the people that put those in place are no longer with the firm, and there's just oversight.
And as Diane mentioned as well, there over the last 14 months, some businesses have taken out PPP loans. Those normally should be handled as a separate issue. They're normally not qualifying for coverage under the rep and warranty policy, or as Diane referenced, there may be escrow and special handling of a PPP loan, but most of the time they get paid off prior to the buyer buying the target company.
Jason, we'll try you again. Are you good?
Apologies. Yeah, the internet works perfectly until it's my turn to chat. So
of course. Thanks, MaryAnne. Appreciate that. Yes. Jason, maybe do a little introduction of yourself, and then we're continuing on with the conversation of what does reps and warranties cover, what are indemnities, etc.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Jason Freiman. I'm a underwriter with Beazley. Been doing that for 3 years. So thanks everyone for taking the time to join us today. I wanted to say a couple points going back. We talked about the timeline. I think right before closing, something that's important to this process is the underwriting call, where in the days leading up to closing, the underwriters would host a call with buyer's counsel and the buyers. We review all of those diligence reports that were mentioned, and then go through and have a quick conversation with the attorneys and the buyers to discuss the diligence that was conducted with respect to the reps that we've been talking about. The other thing is here is we've been talking mostly from our perspective, mostly about buy side policies. There's technically sell side and buy side policies. Today, I think we're focused mostly on the buy side policies, whereby we're focused on the reps that the seller is making and the company is making. Those are the reps that are being covered. So I apologize. My internet cut out, so I'm not sure exactly how far we made it. If we made it through this slide, or
you can go ahead and start from here or take it to the next one, however you prefer.
Yeah, I think that's fine. On the screen here are just examples of reps and warranties that are made in the purchase agreement. As we mentioned before, we're looking at reps that are made. There's no non-compliance with laws. The financial statements are accurate. These are our contracts. There's no breaches of any contracts. These are the environmental reps. These are the assets that we're buying. The assets are sufficient for the conduct of the business. And then as you can see on the bottom, labor and employment, these are our employees. There's, no one's given any threats of leaving us or anything like that. These are our benefit plans. Those are just kind of a broad overview of the reps that are being made by the seller and about the company.
Right. And again, the complete and accurate and truthfulness is doubly addressed because the day of the deal closing, which would be the day that rep and warranty insurance would be incepting, a deal team member for the named insured, and again, generally the buyer, needs to sign a statement that becomes part of the policy, just like in D&O, that says we have no known claims. It's a no known claims disclosure. Mm-hmm. So there's that double requirement for truthfulness, and it's codified in the policy by signing a no claims declaration. And right. If it's signed early and then closed later, as we often have with publicly traded companies, that document is signed at both dates, at the date of signing and also at the true date of deal closing.
Thank you. Yeah. So as MaryAnne mentioned earlier, indemnities, you see line item indemnities in the purchase agreement. A lot of times these are included to address those specific known issues. If there was a known litigation matter that remains open, you would see a specific indemnity for that. If there was an ongoing environmental matter, you probably see a specific indemnity for that. The policy will not cover these specific items because, again, they're already known to the buyer at the time that the transaction is consummated.
So we talked a little bit about permits earlier with Jeff. That often is something I've seen with the European deals where, you know, the buyer has expanded a site, operations, a building, but doesn't have the correct permitting for one reason or another. And so you want to make sure that these kinds of things are evidenced and that somebody is going to be taking care of them before the close, whether that's a discount on the purchase price and the buyer takes that onus on, or whether the seller needs to remedy that before the close or as a condition of the close within certain time frames. So those kinds of things, again, are typical, and often they will just need to be noted and can't be covered by reps and warranties, and they just make part of the purchase sale agreement.
Right. I think to tie it back, sorry, Jason, I think to tie it back to due diligence, these specific indemnities are the things that get unearthed in due diligence. Mm-hmm. You specifically will put some of these, if you know them early in due diligence, into that letter of intent, so that it's an agreed upon term up front. But as Tanja mentioned, sometimes it gets just priced into the overall deal to handle it that way.
Sure, and there could be a large pending claim, but if there's, let's pretend it's a products claim, if there's products liability insurance that will respond to that, and umbrella or excess liability that's sufficient to cover the likelihood of that claim's payout, then both parties can, you know, be comfortable with not having to financially address that as a dollar amount in the agreement.
And I think as brokers, that's where we bring the value, cognizant of our audience being mostly agents and brokers that work with Lloyd's. You know, that's where involving a broker in the due diligence team early on allows us to not only look at the policies, but the liabilities that target company might have, and help the buyer, in this case, highlight some of those liabilities. And sometimes there's a captive that needs to be unwound, or maybe there's a lost portfolio transfer, or again, a large claim that has a potential 10, 20 year, you know, time frame that needs to be accounted for. And I think that's really the value that we as brokers and agents can bring to our clients in helping with M&A and due diligence, and really helping craft that purchase sale agreement to the best ability that the buyer has in negotiating that deal in this case. So
yeah, and Tanja, a lot of what we're seeing now as a trend is, we talked about it earlier, on the financials of the target company, the buyer's team is most likely going to commission or do deep diligence themselves, which we call quality of earnings. What's the likelihood of the financial, you know, numbers being truthful, and then the buyer's going to assess what can we, you know, extrapolate financial results being going forward. So that's called quality of earnings, normally done by an external CPA firm. Similar, and the point that you just raised, Tanja, would be quality of risk. So a lot of times brokerage and consulting firms now are doing a quality of risk analysis to unearth what you stated. Is there sufficient coverage? Is an extended reporting period, tail coverage, going to be required and in place on the target company to give peace of mind for the buyer? Are the limits correct? Are there actuarial projections that need to be looked into? Are there any missing coverages? Did they or did they not have employment practices or whatever? So quality of risk is now becoming quite normative in a deal transaction as well.
And I think we'll talk about that as well as we look at integration. So in the second half of our yes, session, because there's a lot that we can do as brokers and agents, again, to help our clients prepare for a risk integration
yes,
and what we can do there. So thanks, MaryAnne. Continuing on, Jason, I think I'm not sure if you want to stay on this slide, make any further comments, but the fun acronyms that we have in our industries, we have baskets, caps, and escrows to talk about.
Yeah, I think These next two slides are where I laugh because someone asked me what I do. There's always a slight pause, but if I can explain it to my wife, who is in the medical field, I feel like I can explain it here. Baskets are essentially what the buyer has to hit before they can recover. So that's your deductible. You have your car insurance, you get an accident, you have to pay $500 before they'll fix it. There's your basket. The cap is the maximum amount the seller is going to be on the hook for. And the escrow, I think, is better answered if we go to the next slide. But this is essentially the money that was set aside to cover any of these issues that would arise. But I think I'll save that if we go to the next slide. That one's a little better.
There we go.
Okay, so here we have, so on the left is how these deals were typically consummated, and on the right you have what happens now with our with using a rep and warranty insurance. So on the left, what typically happened is you had a $100 million deal, essentially $10 million, 10% of the purchase price would be put aside into an escrow account. If anything went wrong, if there were any claims against that, that's what you would go after. You would go after that $10 million that was set in escrow, subject again to that maybe $1 million basket that was the deductible before they would be able to recover. With the using of a rep and warranty insurance, you've essentially freed up $8.5 million, because instead of putting aside $10 million into an escrow account, you are using us. You're using the insurance company for this $10 million policy. So then you're still subject to the cap, essentially 1 million, maybe a basket of 500,000. However, those are negotiated. For our purposes, it's typically 1% of the purchase price. But instead of tying up $10 million in escrow, that essentially $10 million would be the insurance policy that's in place.
And Jason, thank you for this representation. I like to have a visual as a visual learner. So it really brings down the value of the reps and warranties. Talk a little bit about the deductible or retention. There's, there's the 50-50 concept. Yeah. There's the no seller,
Yeah. So essentially, so again, $10 million deal, 1% retention, right? $1 million. So we typically look for like a split indemnity, whereas 500,000 would be on the buyer, 500,000 would be on the seller. There are certain deals called no seller indemnity or no seller recourse, whereby the seller is not on the hook for all of that. So the entire 1% retention would be borne by the buyer. I think we're starting to see those more and more, and I think we'll get into those a little bit later in the presentation. From an underwriting side, those are going to cost a little more. The seller doesn't really have any money vested in there, at least if they're on the hook for 0.5% of the purchase value. They have a little skin in the game. In the absence of that, and a true no seller indemnity deal, those deals tend to cost a little more from an insurance point of view because they're a little bit more risky. The seller just doesn't have some of that financial skin in the game.
Well, and in this market of very rapid kind of bid auction, M&As, we're seeing a little bit more of that, right? From a buyer perspective, just to get that deal done and just to have one step up compared to the competition. Just again, MaryAnne's concept of selling a home, right? Do you want to be 10, 15, 20K above asking and maybe have a better, so think about reps and warranties insurance in that venue.
And the no seller indemnity basically is something that the seller often is insisting on, and they'll put it in their version of the purchase agreement negotiations, and depends who's got the power in the transaction, and if one party can achieve what they wish, and a lot of times the seller, there's a trend toward no seller indemnity bases in the contracts. The seller will put that in there, in which case, as Jason just stated, once the deal is transacted, the reps and warranties basically sunset, and the rep and warranty policy is then looked at as the sole source of economic recovery should there be a breach, and the seller walks away, waves goodbye, and did not even need to leave any money behind for a portion of the retention. So you can understand why the sellers are in favor of that. And the buyer may be fine with that too, if they got concessions or pricing or comfort. And sometimes the buyers would rather work with their own insurance company providing the rep and warranty rather than having to chase a seller post-transaction.
And I think this slide is a great example, is a great presentation of why a private equity company would like it. If a private equity company does 10 deals, they essentially have $100 million tied up in escrows. By virtue of the policy, they can take out, call it a $10 million policy for $300,000. We'll talk about pricing or limits a little bit, but now they only have tied up $3 million, right? So the investment for I have to check my math on that one, but the investment for the private equity, company, it's clear, right? They're not tying up $100 million of escrows that won't be released for a year, 2 years, years down the road. They can use this policy for $300,000 a pop for a $10 million policy.
Yeah,
Absolutely. In
Jason,
private
to that
equity
point,
firms, it's estimated that probably on PE-led deals, probably 75% or higher of those transactions are actively using a rep and warranty placement for the purposes, many purposes, many of which Jason just alluded to. It's economically advantageous. And then the PE firm has that money to go do other deals. So it's got an economic attractiveness to have the cash rather than having it tied up and have opportunity cost associated with it. And probably for strategics, the number that are purchasing rep and warranty is probably between 65 and 70% of those transactions are now using rep and warranty. And the numbers have continued to increase each and every year as more lawyers, because oftentimes these deals or these rep and warranty placements are being supported by or driven by the law firms using rep and warranty for their customers, whether buyer or seller, using it as an advantageous approach.
Jeff, thank you. Thank you, MaryAnne. Good comments. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to Jason's point, what MaryAnne was also describing. I've been a part of a couple of acquisitions from PE firms where we've already gone through either the escrow or holdback period, but we've still had time to make indemnification claims, and we have. And those PE firms have had to then do capital calls to get money back to pay a buyer back. And they're not very happy to do that. And for buyers who are making those indemnification claims, we know that they don't have the cash. And so it's not a great spot to be in to try to force a PE seller to do a capital call, because it's going to be a dogfight to get that to happen.
Right. And when a PE firm is on the buy side, some PE firms like to keep current management in place. And those folks are often the sellers, and it can be very awkward to turn around and sue your senior management team for indemnification claims. So I would say one of the best advantages of using rep and warranty insurance is that the new buyer gets to go against their insurance policy as opposed to their management team.
Overall, the two words would be deal facilitation. Rep and warranty can be an overlay that has multiple advantages to both buyer and seller, and also timing. It can really smooth over a number of what historically would have been negotiating fuss points between the two parties. And sometimes the fuss points would be so severe a deal could fall apart. But with the introduction and use of rep and warranty, it can help deals get to closing with less grinding for all parties.
That's
and with a modest cost.
That's a great point, MaryAnne. So what we're seeing is that there's a lot less fussing over the reps and warranties.
Right.
If the sellers, if their indemnification obligations is really limited to 0.5% of the equity value, that's very different. And I think sellers are a lot more willing to give expansive reps and warranties with their indemnification obligations being so limited. So, say the buyer wants the compliance with laws rep to go back to the beginning of time, right? So it says the company complies and has complied at all times with all applicable laws. So if I'm on the sell side, I'm still not going to let them get away with that. But I'm a lot more inclined to even entertain the notion than if my client is going to be standing behind that dollar for dollar once we get past the deductible.
Right.
So, Mark, if you could flip to the next slide, we've been talking around the benefits of reps and warranties. We could just show that visual. And then I want to ask another question that we've all kind of said out loud, MaryAnne, the statistics around the PE firms versus the strategic buyers. We've been talking about the fact that reps and warranties insurance is now being used by buyers and sellers under the 100 million threshold of value, or more middle market buyers. So I don't know, Jason or MaryAnne, if you want to maybe address that in terms of the market.
Sure, I can go back, take it 10, 20 years ago. Rep and warranty existed back then, but it was only for deals well in excess of hundreds of millions of dollars, and the rate online was nearly 10%. So it was an expensive coverage, and it was only used on very large deals. It has come mainstream, and now we routinely see coverage for deals below 100 million and for deals below 50 million in economic value, or EV, and really for deals below 30 million. So there's a whole strata of coverage and appetite and protection for deals of all sizes, public and private transactions. And, and it's quite affordable, you know, think somewhere around 30 basis points against the deal's economic value.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think from the underwriting perspective, you're typically looking at insuring about 10% of the purchase price, which for us, some of the smallest deals we'll write is 3 million, which, obviously takes that to about a $30 million transaction. We are starting to see that, I had a request to write a policy on an $8 million policy last week. From the underwriting perspective, we typically don't like to insure maybe right around that, anything above that 50% threshold. And again, that just goes to risk allocation, right? If now you're insuring greater than 50% of the deal, and, are you incentivizing the seller? At what point, do the benefits outweigh the risk? So we're typically looking for about 10% of EV. We'll kind of go up to, not 50% of the EV. But yes, we are starting to see it on smaller, especially as it becomes more used in strategic purchases.
Sure. Yeah, Mark, we routinely start at 10%. A lot of customers will buy at 15 or 20% of the EV, or 30. If it becomes larger than 30, there's a question about how much management rollover there is and a few more questions, but Jason's absolutely right. It does not typically go above 49% because it's not a financial guarantee. It's really designed to help facilitate the transaction and to deal with unknown exposures.
Thank you, Mark. I was going to go to the pricing issue. We did get a question in the chat that maybe we can address now. And I do see one about the medical marijuana companies, and maybe we can park that for a moment. But the question in the chat that is pertinent to what we're discussing now is the violation of laws covered by reps and warranties? And if so, is insurance encouraging unlawful behavior? The answer is no, but I'll let the experts reply. Meaning,
I'll defer to Jason as the underwriter.
Yeah, I saw that question, and I like it. Yes, it is covered, and no, it is not. What rep and warranty insurance is not, it is not a substitute for diligence. We spoke briefly about the underwriting call earlier, and responses like, we are relying on sellers' reps, will not get those reps covered. So we are not looking to, we are not a substitute for diligence. The diligence has to be conducted. The lien litigation, bankruptcy searches should be done and current. Thorough diligence and should be conducted on all reps and all aspects. So I don't believe it's encouraging unlawful behavior, because it's still up to the buyer to be able to diligence these matters and prove to us that they have conducted thorough diligence on those matters.
Right, and I'll just wrap around what Jason said. The underwriter always holds, I'll call it the power of the pen. If the buyer has not conducted adequate diligence or diligence at all for a particular item, then the underwriter has the power of the pen to just carve that out. If it was not important enough to the buyer's team to perform normative and thorough diligence, then to think that another party is going to want to sign on and take on that responsibility, it will not happen. It's an unrealistic expectation, and it will generate a carve out in the final language called an exclusion.
Yeah,
Jeff?
I mean, I'll just add from my buyer's perspective of, if the bad behavior is bribery, right, or something around export controls, we're going to inherit that as the buyer. So we're not going to be encouraging that kind of behavior, because we'll take on that liability, even for the past acts of the target. So we have no interest in that as the buyer and taking that on. So I don't think that it would encourage the bad behavior.
And in true Lloyd's tradition of the utmost good faith mantra, that's what rep and warranty is. It's an utmost good faith that all parties are being factual and straightforward and transparent and providing the information that they have at hand. With that, the underwriting team assesses the presented information. To the extent that the underwriting team is comfortable with it, it will be a broad and strong coverage presentation. And to the extent that the underwriting team is not comfortable, you'll see limitations, further requests for information after the underwriting call. And if there's really no comfort, you'll see an exclusion.
So we have just 2 slides I'd like to touch on before the break, and we'll take a 15-minute break. The 2 slides are a little bit around pricing and underwriting timelines, and it goes to what we're saying. Jason, as an underwriter, is going to ask for a lot of information that you would normally be looking at during a due diligence. So the underwriting process is pretty in-depth. There's a charge with it as part of the purchase of the reps and warranties policy. So again, the moral hazard hopefully gets diminished or identified throughout this process. So Jason, if you want to maybe chat about underwriting timeline, we can go back to the costing. And then we'll take a little break, and that'll give our panelists a little bit of time to think about if anybody wants to comment or answer the question about marijuana M&A. We'll come back after the break and give that a little answer.
Yeah, I think on pricing, the slide said 2%. I think that's probably a bit low where we are now. I think maybe 2.5, probably closer to 2.7. 4% and change. Yeah, maybe if you're looking at like a $3 million policy, you're probably going to be at 4% or a little above. Then as the limit goes up, the rate would go down. So $3 million limit, probably around 4%. $20 million limit, probably closer down to two and change, depending. Retention's pretty consistent, about 1% of EV. Again, when you start getting into lower limits, that's going to increase. But on a $100 million transaction, you'd be looking somewhere probably around high 2s, low 3s for limit. You'd be looking at a 1% retention. Then there's an underwriting fee for us. I can't speak to other carriers. For us, it hovers right around $25,000, $30,000. That is not a cost that the underwriters keep. That's passed on to our counsel, who reviews the documents in tangent with us and prepares a report for us to review during our process.
And just as Jason alluded to, on the retention for the small deals, and a small deal generally would be considered to be one at around 33 million in EV or less. The retention will have a minimum amount. So rather than a percentage of a smaller transaction, it'll have a floor of, pick a number, $250,000 or $300,000 to start with. And it will drop probably to no lower than 200,000, maybe 150. So at the fringes, there are different, just metrics that come into play.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the bottom our retentions would drop would be around 150. So if that 0.5% is less than 150, you'd be looking at a USD, not a percent.
Correct. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And then with respect to timing on the next slide, essentially we look at it as for us to review a submission, we would ask for basically three things. We would ask for the SIM, the confidential information memorandum or management presentation. Would ask for financials, preferably audited, but oftentimes reviewed or unaudited. And then we would ask for the most recent copy of the purchase agreement, be it an asset, a stock purchase, whatever the purchase agreement was. Based on that, we would provide what we call an NBI, non-binding indication. Typically, you'd receive multiple of those from the market. You go back to your client. You'd pick Beazley because we're the best. And then based on that, we would begin the underwriting process, which again involves us reviewing the documents, sending them over to our counsel. We prepare an agenda. We set a time for the call, try to keep those calls about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Benefit of Beazley is we do not have our counsel on the call. So there's no long-winded lawyers other than the underwriter to hold up those calls.
As we have two lawyers on the panel.
There, yeah. So once you get off the call with us, we have policies. Those policies typically are in line with the counsel that's being used. So the more we work with a certain law firm, again on the buy side, we have a good form in place, which hopefully eases some of the negotiation of the policy, and then we close in tangent with the consummation of the transaction. We receive the NCD that MaryAnne mentioned earlier, and that's it. I mean, from our aspect, it's pretty much sending us docs, letting us review them, jump on the call with us for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then we follow you. We review updated docs as necessary and find the policy.
Right, and the reference on the bottom that deals can be done, within a 10-day or a 2-week time period has historically been correct. I'll just reference that with COVID and the slowdown in Q2 and 3 of 2020, and then the pickup during Q4 of 2020 through current days, the month of June is stacking up to be very busy. It's end of month, which is always busier. It's end of quarter, which is always busier. It's right before 4th of July. So if anybody has any transactions that are targeting June timeframes, just starting earlier is highly recommended.
Yeah, end of year. I mean, this right now,
end of year, certainly.
Memorial Day weekend feels like Q4 right now. So
yes,
everything is crazy.
Everybody's trying to close things up. So there's a lot more questions coming, and it's 10:20. Let's do 10:20. You're right. Let's really stick to that 15-minute. When we come back, we are going to talk about best practices for deal progression, for each step of the deal, integration, a couple of other thoughts on the marijuana industry. So I'm going to be curious to see which one of our panelists will address that one. And again, keep your questions coming. We appreciate everybody's time, and thank you so much. Let's take a 15-minute break.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming back. Mark, lovely music, lovely music. Thank you. I know Mark shared a poll about returning to the office, yes or no. Maybe Mark, at the end, you can kind of let us know what the results were. My personal, Hylant has announced a hybrid workflow, and so there will be some offices that will return certain days, and office had choice, but we will continue to give our employees flexibility. Hylant being a private family-owned company, we really do believe that that's the best thing we can do for employees and families. My husband is in banking and treasury. Looks like they're projecting returns right after the holidays, so September. I was with one of the insurers yesterday, and they are going to start a slow return in June. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens, but thank you all for coming back. We have quite a good crowd, and a couple of additional questions have come in. But I did take advantage during the break to get some data on marijuana M&A, which of course is a hot topic in this industry. And before I kind of relay what I've learned, I think I'm going to just see if anybody on the panel wants to comment on that. I don't know, Jason, MaryAnne, Jeff, Diane, do any of you have direct experience with the topic and want to chime in?
I do, but I'll allow others if they want to go first.
From a Beazley perspective, it's pretty straightforward. We don't do anything that has to do with marijuana. I mean, it's just pretty easy for us. We just that's not those just aren't deals that we're doing.
So you're saying you just say no?
Yes, yes.
I dare to say no. That's pretty good.
Well played.
That's been what I've encountered as well. There are just a number of issues, unless and until it gets federal approval.
Yep.
There's prohibitions on any interstate banking, et cetera. It is just too much of a unknown moving target without approvals, and it can be stopped and started problematically. So most insurers and brokers are waiting it out until there's more federal approval of authorization or not.
So, you know, some of the statistics I found on statista.com, it's available. Anybody can go look. Clearly, M&A deals are happening in the marijuana industry as well as we speak. Deals have been in the $200 to $400 million range. Some
They're
have
paying
been
cash.
Yes. So most have been cash or stock,
Yep.
right? Because of what you mentioned with the banking and the federal, et cetera.
Yep.
It seems like the deals that have occurred are about expansion into territories. So Northeast companies buying West Coast companies or vice versa, you know, so on and so forth. There is clear interest in the field, and you know, I think we as an industry will continue watching it. There are those within the industry that are focused on this, that are working on from an insurance side, from a broker side, et cetera. So it will continue to grow, and we'll just have to watch it. And so here's another fun question. Did marijuana use increase during the pandemic? Yes or no on the panel? Yeah.
One would figure.
Again, it's one of those things, right? You kind of go, okay, you eat more fast food, you learn to cook at home, you maybe try some. Anyways, interesting factoids. So thanks for that question. I think that was from Mike.
Oh, and another interesting data point. So I represent a fair amount of private equity folks, and most private equity funds in their fund documents have a prohibition on what we call kind of the dirty three, which is things that go boom. So, you know, any sorts of guns, any sorts of explosives, anything that is, you know, illegal. So, which would include generally, you know, marijuana, unless and until it gets approved on the federal level, and tobacco.
Right.
And actually now there are some private equity funds that are popping up that are really focusing on marijuana. The vast majority still do not. They have their prohibition on the dirty three. But, you know, earlier when we were talking about there's a lot of money out there, including a lot of dry powder in the private equity funds purses, you know, so most of that doesn't apply to the marijuana industry, but then there are these, you know, very focused funds that deal primarily in this space. So it's going to be really interesting to see where things go.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, Diane, you know, from a macro level, what you read or hear in the business news, right? Those tobacco companies, some of them have invested in some way in some of the marijuana or cannabis companies. And I think that you're only going to see, as Tanja was mentioning, consolidation going forward. These smaller companies growing into larger companies, or the tobacco owners coming in and buying that, as cigarettes are, you know, definitely trending downward worldwide.
Yeah, there's also interesting some interplay between alcohol companies and marijuana companies, which
Right. Yeah, the cannabis infused drinks that are coming out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's another industry that grew with the pandemic, right? Toilet paper and alcohol. No. Anyways, as we were talking, I just got texts. I live in DuPage County, that DuPage County is now making vaccines available for 12-year-olds and up. So I know my children are getting vaccinated tomorrow. We won't go there. It's a political thing. But look, as I'm ready to travel, I'm ready for my family to be safe. We're getting shots and we're off. Can't wait. Okay, so host is sharing poll results. Are you planning to return to the office? It looks like 47% are saying no, I will continue to work remotely. Doesn't say the time frame. The next answer is 34% are saying yes, they will return to the office in the next few months. And then we have 8% that have already returned. I feel for you guys. And then another 7% that is kind of like, I'm not sure. And 4% that says yes, but I will return in the next few weeks. So it does sound like 47% is saying we will continue to work remote. And then another 34% is saying, yes, we will return to the office in some way in the next few months. So Diane, Jeff, Jason, do you guys want to comment about your particular companies or industries? Thanks, Mark. That was a good poll.
I've been a designated home worker since last July. So me commuting back to the office would be a very, very long commute that I won't be undertaking, but our offices are opening, and I think it'll probably be more of a flexible. I don't see many people going back 5 days a week.
Yeah, I actually switched law firms in November, and I went to my office at the new law firm for the first time on Monday. Before that, I'd been told that I had an office, but had yet to see it in person. So I plan to go back in person a couple days a week, but still primarily work from home.
Jeff?
So we are still for, a manufacturing company, right? So we have the bulk of our workforce is still on the plant floors. And, thankfully we've had very limited COVID cases. So they've been there. They never left. Whereas some of us who are more in office type jobs, we have primarily not been there since everybody else since March of 2020. But our planning, we still haven't completely finalized all the details, but I think there will be some sort of hybrid return for the office workers starting after the 4th of July. I know I've been back sporadically, at least 1 or 2 days a week.
That's good to know. Thank you. And, I appreciate Mark is sending links to the documents. I know many of you are asking about CE credits. Do log in, make sure you put your producer number to the registration for the event. And then at the end, you will have to sign in one more time with your producer number, broker number, et cetera, to get the CE credits. So make sure you're doing that and you're staying on for this next intense hour. The other thing is we have uploaded documents and the slides are available and will be available right after this. And there is a YouTube channel, which Mark has shared the link to on the chat. So you can watch any of these of this session that you may have missed. Feel free to share it with your colleagues. And again, we are all more than happy to take questions, make ourselves available if you want to learn more. There's a great question from an anonymous attendee. I feel like I'm an auctioneer. Is there a correlation between limit and deal size, and how do you set up the limit? So I think, Jason, why don't you take it first, and then.
Yeah, I think the easiest answer is about 10% of the deal size. And then it kind of can go from there, 15, 20%. Again, we're not really seeing anything above 50%, but we've certainly seen pushes up to 25 or 30%. But I think the simplest answer is about 10% of EV, maybe 15 or 20%.
Yeah, and it's MaryAnne. I'll just also on one of our earlier slides, we put that limits. Generally, the minimum limit is $3 million for a deal at $30 million or below. And we had on that slide that maximum limit generally is 40 million. That would be for any one insurer. And if higher limits are needed for a very large size deal, then we would do a structured placement with a primary and an excess, or with 2 towers on a quota share basis. So there's plenty of capacity, but any one insurer is generally limiting their offering to around 30 or 40 million for an individual placement. But as needed, we cobble more limits together for a mega deal.
And like everything in the insurance industry, it sounds like capacity is the name of the game, lack thereof, or in certain industries like reps and warranties, we are getting a little bit more interest in more capacity. So
a lot of capacity, but also, as we referenced earlier, sometimes some insurers are very hesitant or not interested in putting up any terms for an industry, perhaps tobacco, perhaps certain types of implantable healthcare products, et cetera. So just bear that in mind as well.
Things that go boom, right, Diane?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so let's segue before we go into best practices for each phase of a deal, and more Jeff and Diane kind of leading the conversation. I want to conclude. Beazley is an excellent market for reps and warranties, but there are others out there. So I'm going to ask MaryAnne to just chime on that for a moment. Who are your top markets, and is there a difference between the insurance companies? As a broker, how do you evaluate a reps and warranties insurer? Any thoughts?
Yeah, as many of you may know, I was president of Lloyd's Illinois Inc. for 6 years, and I've been a broker into the Lloyd's market for Aon and Marsh and others for many years as well. The Lloyd's phrase of horses for courses. So we select the insurers based on what the customer needs, and there are approximately 25 insurers or facilities. And by facilities, that would be a managing general agency, managing general underwriter. Euclid Transactional would fall into that, Concord Specialty Risk, et cetera, that they are representing anywhere between 2 to 4 to 5 insurers on their panel. So we have a good feel and knowledge of which insurers like metal goods manufacturing, that would be everybody, which insurers are willing to take on a healthcare exposure and risk, et cetera. So depending what the customer needs, we go to the insurers to get non-binding indications. And rather than single them out by name, because there are 25, I don't want to exclude anybody, but we have favorites, again, by performance and scope of cover and reaction time, and others that we go to as needed for larger limits, et cetera. And some only want to see a deal if it's 100 million and above. Others will take a deal at 50 million and below. So we select accordingly.
Thanks, MaryAnne. And again, Jason, you hinted at this earlier. There's a portfolio approach to reps and warranties that often, you can engage with a PE firm who's a frequent buyer, et cetera. Do you or MaryAnne want to comment a little bit about that, and how likely is this going to continue into the future?
Yeah, I think that's a good chunk of our business. I think, again, anything you can do to facilitate the process on everyone's end. So working with private equities on multiple deals, and typically they're engaging the same counsel. So, any chance you have to build rapport, build forms, build process, always helps facilitate it. They get comfortable with our process, and they know how it's going to proceed, and we're comfortable, with the diligence and the processes that they've carried out as well. So it's a big part of our business. It's a growing part of our business, and it's definitely nice to see those repeats come across.
Thanks, Jason. MaryAnne, you want to?
Yeah, it's just very efficient, and there's a knowledge and a trust. Jason and I, all of us would be seeing that, and we try and package things together. There is one insurer panel overseas that has a prescribed portfolio approach. and reduced underwriting fee, again, because the counsel is generally the same. The QOE documentation would be by the same CPA firm, et cetera. So they can put it, and probably the savings on a true portfolio approach might be somewhere around 25 or 30% of the premium. The other savings that you get is time efficiency in getting from a point in the deal to the end with trust and confidence. And with a known, you negotiate the policy form once up front, and you basically replicate it for future deals, and put in the customization that's needed for the particular transaction, but it can go very smoothly. So saving time and effort and money, either way you go on the true portfolio or just on the repeat business approach. Highly
Thanks,
recommended, and it works well.
Okay, so one final question around reps and warranties that we don't have a slide on, but we discussed we would hit on is claims. So clearly we buy insurance to protect and to handle our claims if and when. So Jason, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about how Beazley manages a claim or the claims process? Any comments around that?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is we have them and we pay them. So that's
that's a good thing.
I mean, we keep, we have a team of claims people that, that work with us, and, we keep them busy. I think what you're seeing a lot now is it's not so much as whether it's a claim or whether it's not a claim. I think where these are where the fight is, that's not a good word, but is, actually over the valuation and, does the multiple apply? A lot of what we're seeing in claims now is, around financial reps, fraud and customer claims, taking those and trying to think, we spoke earlier about the underwriting process. You can't underwrite fraud. So I think it kind of goes back to the compliance laws. We underwrite the diligence that's performed if a seller has been fraudulent. That's almost impossible to underwrite. So those are a lot of claims. If the numbers are being fudged in the books, there's really nothing we can do to underwrite that process. From the customer side, what we see a lot is maybe there's a major customer, the sales manager knew this client was leaving, but never, communicated it to the deal team. So I think a lot of the claims that we're seeing now are finance reps, tax reps, customer suppliers. Those seem to be the big ones that we're going. From Beazley's perspective, we, take pride in the fact that we're proactive. We try not to go to the mattresses, so to speak, with these, trying to make sure our positions are reasonable. And quite frankly, we really haven't had to go down many formal processes. We've only had a couple. One of them was a big market tower that fell, and the judge actually, it went to arbitration, and then the judge found for the market. So I guess the takeaways there are, we are getting them, we are seeing them, we are paying them. And I guess the last thing is in this realm that we operate in, we are, this is probably a higher than normal class of notifications. We see a lot of notifications, and those are handled by our claims team.
Yeah, and I can wrap around that, and I can also give an example that I'm aware of for both fraud and material contracts. I know of one situation where both applied to the same situation, that the seller was so devious that when the buyer was striving to conduct their due diligence, the seller said, well, here's our biggest customer, call this number, ask to speak with so-and-so, et cetera. So the buyer did that, and it was all scripted, and it was all fraudulent. So the buyer, tried to do the diligence and got a rousing, affirmation that the customer was going to continue to do business with the firm, et cetera. And that was all bogus. The customer had already walked away, but the seller was horribly fraudulent, et cetera. So situations do occur. On some of the other claims information that I have available, the top three generally, and it will vary by jurisdiction, USA versus European or Asia Pacific, but the hit parade for types of claims are tax. Nearly 20% of the claims that come in the USA are tax related. Material contracts, the biggest one generally being loss of a key customer. That's around 16%. The other hit parade leader is accounting and finance, and that's around 15%. Employee claims come in. That could be anything from misclassification to someone that was supposed to stay leaves. Compliance with laws is another top item. Emergence, when do the claims come in? It varies by the size of the deal. And as Jason mentioned, there are a lot of notifications come forward. The smallest size deals put forth the most notifications simply because they're ultra cautious. Manufacturing, industrials have the most claims notifications. Time emergence, 6 months within 6 months of closing, around 32% of the transaction claims that are presented are within a 6-month period. For the first year, add on another 25, so that's about 57% of claims notifications are in the first year. Add on another 6 months and add on another 20%, so you get to 77%. 18 to 24 months, so in the first 2 years, nearly 86% of the claims that are going to arise have come in within the first 2 years. And if you think it through, most organizations are doing a financial audit, and that would be within a 12-month time frame. So that's one of the ones. Also, if you've bought machinery and you have an expectation that's going to have performance output, and it does not, that becomes clear quite quickly. Same thing with customers. You'll know right away that you have that customer or not. So the emergence is obviously within the first 24 months. And probably 20% of the rep and warranty placements will have a claims notification and a claim for payment. And the average, and again, the average is skewed because some deals are quite large. Average claims payout is around $19 million. So when asked, do these policies respond and pay? The answer is yes and yes.
MaryAnne, thank you for those statistics. I was going
and then industry-wise, the biggest claims notifiers and those seeking recovery would be the industrials. So that would be manufacturing firms. Real estate historically has been second, and healthcare third, consumer products fourth, IT fifth, and probably look to see some changes of that going forward. I would think certainly with real estate.
Oh yeah, that's going to be a fun market for the real estate.
It's going to be affected. So yeah, watch this space.
Jeff, Diane, any comments? Have you lived through a claim with any of your prior M&A deals, reps and warranties, clients? Thanks, MaryAnne.
I mean, one thing that I'll add and then let Diane hop in is, you know, MaryAnne, you were saying that there are more notices for smaller deals. And I think part of that reason is that it has a bigger material impact to the overall price, right? So
yes,
you're gonna be making more of those smaller claims
right
on a smaller deal. So so to your question, Tanja, yes, I've been through claims, and you know, it's never fun when you miss. One of those was a fraud related claim, so that was literally chasing down owners because that was the only way to get it.
One other point I think it's important, and it's one of the reasons why some buyers like having a rep and warranty policy, would be if there is a need for economic recovery, if there has been a breach, if there's a rep and warranty policy, the named insured, the buyer generally, will work directly with the rep and warranty insurance company, singular or plural, to provide the documentation and to request recovery. It stays out of the court system. There is no need to present a lawsuit to recover from your rep and warranty insurer. It's done on business document exchange, so it stays out of the court and it is non-public knowledge. And for some organizations, that's an important point as well. And rep and warranty insurers have very knowledgeable individuals, mainly attorneys and CPAs and specialists that understand breach and representations and points that have been made that are or are not covered under the policy. So the process can go quickly and with good clarity. and explanations. So I applaud the industry and all that they do.
I am dying to ask, what is the typical time frame between notification and payout of a claim?
From what I've seen, generally 6 months. Can be shorter or longer, depends on information flow, et cetera. 6 to 12 months from what I've experienced, which is actually quite quick.
Yeah. Jason, do you concur, more or less, 6 to 12 months?
I honestly could not tell you. I'm happy to go back and look, but that's handled by our claims team. We see it, we flinch, we check our files. I make sure I didn't mess up too bad, and then I hope there was an exclusion to cover the claim.
Or if there wasn't, you craft one really quickly. No. Anyways, thank you. A little humor. Diane, I'd like for you to jump in. I think the moral hazard, fraud, topic might be something you want to chime in on. I'd appreciate that.
Sure. So it all kind of comes together. On the buy side, I have been fortunate not to have to deal with any rep and warranty insurance claims. And on the sell side, often they're, it's kind of seamless to the sellers because they talk to the insurer and, hopefully they don't need anything from the sellers in connection with that. The caveat to that is if there are allegations of fraud. So what we're seeing from a sell side is that to the extent that a rep and warranty insurer denies the claim, then the only real recourse of the buyer is to allege fraud. And so let's take a step back and kind of explain for the non-deal folks who are on the call how fraud works in the context of a transaction and indemnification. So with respect to kind of your classic deal pre-rep and warranty insurance, fraud was carved out from all of those baskets and caps that we talked about. And it's still the case that, both a handful, actually, let me take that back. Almost every jurisdiction, certainly every jurisdiction in the US has said you can't really contract around fraud. And so because of that, there are always fraud exclusions from the limitations on indemnification. And as we've talked about here, rep and warranty insurance does not cover fraud. So if the buyers have some sort of claim and they can't get it paid through the rep and warranty insurance, what they'll do sometime is they'll allege fraud against the sellers. And so I've seen this come up in somewhat ridiculous situations where, on the disclosure schedules, let's say the material contract schedule, we've listed 200 contracts and they missed one. And the buyers are saying, well, this is clearly fraudulent, where it's actually clearly just a mistake. So what we've seen is kind of, I think, an unintended consequence is that there are more and more allegations of fraud, which, it can be really hard to prove an absence of fraud. So it's becoming a bit of a headache for sellers, but it's one of the trends that we're seeing in the market right now.
That's a good point, Diane. So keep our eyes open for that. And
let me just add, I think all of us that are in this transactional space understand this, but I'll just, for our audience members, in addition to all of the documents that are produced, and those are all the diligence documents and QOE and maybe QOR and whatever, an electronic copy of the virtual data room. So that would incorporate, disclosures, purchase agreement, all the rest of the stuff. That is required to be provided to the insurer, as soon as possible after the closing. So all of that information is captured and kept on file with both the insurer and the broker, so that if a claim does come up, the source information for reference is on file.
Thank you for all of those comments. I'm going to do the segue now, unless you want to add anything more on specifically reps and warranties. We promised the second hour of our session would be on, best practices, and Jason, MaryAnne, absolutely chime in. I think I'm going to ask Jeff and Diane to kind of start leading it. Earlier, we set out a 10, 12 step kind of process in terms of the typical deal flow goes like this, and the green and blue colorful slide that Diane was addressing. So from Jeff and Diane's perspective first, and then MaryAnne and Jason, please chime in. At every single step of the process, there could be some best practices, lessons learned, tools, templates, providers, anything that you want to discuss or chime in on. And let's start with that data room, right? The data room is probably one of the first things you need to do. And how best to populate, who should have access, when do you turn it on, when do you turn it off, and also clauses within the purchase sale agreement. Do you destroy it? Do you return the information? So maybe start there, and happy to have either Jeff or Diane start the conversation and take us through it.
Sure. Since I'm wearing the seller's hat, I'll start with the data room discussion. So we highly recommend, and no one ever follows this advice, but so be it. We highly recommend putting together a data room as soon as possible, because it's a very tedious process. And if it's well put together and well organized, when you have lots of time at the beginning of the process, then it's the best time to do it. Because when we get towards the middle or end of the process, there's a lot going on. Management is going to be pulled in a million different directions. Usually the CFO of a target is the keeper of all of the facts and often all of the documents. And they're going to be incredibly busy with a million other things. So again, we highly recommend doing that as early in the process as possible, because that's when folks have the most time. Having said that, that rarely happens. An organized data room is, it's really key. And as the transaction goes on, sometimes the organization kind of falls by the wayside. Most virtual data rooms now are searchable, so it's less of an issue. But at the same time, so there's usually a due diligence request list. And, if there's only one potential buyer, they'll send it to the seller. And ideally, they'll populate the data room kind of with the same numbering as the due diligence request list. What I recommend, if it's an auction and I'm representing the seller, is I'll send them kind of my form due diligence list, and I'll say, populated according with this. We can even post this list to the data room so that it helps buyers orient themselves. So I would say that's absolutely a best practice that is almost never followed.
Jeff, thanks, Diane.
Yeah, I mean, from the data room side, on the buy side, I would echo Diane's advice, because I think, once we start hitting the seller with all of our diligence requests, and it's a bombardment that comes from not just the lawyers, but HR, insurance, tax, finance, EHS, it comes heavy and often. And so the longer it takes a seller to produce some of this stuff, then some doubt gets put into the buy side of, oh, maybe that's a problem, or this place is a mess. They have no organization whatsoever. It's going to be a disaster if we take it over. Those thoughts happen, and it's talked about often.
And as a broker, having been through deals, I think that what you just have said is key. We often try to bring value to our clients by doing what you've described, Diane, is here is a list of things, of items from an insurance perspective that you should have ready, that you should pre-populate, that you should, make available. And there's layers, policies, loss runs, claims, litigated issues, et cetera. So you don't release everything right up front. You wait for folks to ask, but certainly bringing value to the client in that manner, and and having the data available means that that seller has given it some thought, has organized it, right? Back to your point, Jeff, and they're ready to discuss it. The other thing that I've found very helpful as a broker working with our clients is those clients who have organized deal team calls to make sure, because you saw the deal team org chart. There's, generally 40, 50, 60 people participating on the deal as the letter of intent is signed and the deal seems to progress. Having every couple of weeks a call with all of the providers, vendors, relationship, E&Y, accounting firm, law firms, brokers, etc., to discuss what items are missing and what items are considered issues or potential stumbling blocks, allows for sharing and cross-pollination within the buy team. Let's assume the client is now the buyer. And to hear some of the work that we as a broker might have evidenced from an HR perspective, or liabilities or environmental or ESG is I found that very helpful. Any comments? Have you experienced that as well in leading a team, Jeff? Do you do calls?
Yeah. So we have kind of structured either calls or meetings, usually weekly, during the diligence period to make sure all the parties that are involved are getting through the diligence. What additional diligence requests do we have? And usually there's a point person who's collecting all of those, so it's just one big list that goes back to the seller of these are all the additional requests that we have or follow-up questions. And then usually we will have, or near our diligence period, we will have a big group meeting where we hash out all of the key obstacles, or hey, at least from my team, from the legal perspective, is everything good? Are we not worried about anything, or are there no key things that we're worried about that we need to dig further into to see if we want to move forward on the deal? I think, and those involve both internal people, but also the external members of the team as well.
Yeah, and I would just add, as the broker, when it becomes very serious and we're within 3 to 4 weeks from the targeted closing date for the deal, I generally set up calls with the customer's key team members and our placing staff twice a week. Because there's just trying to set and meet everybody's expectations and share the information. And they can be short, they can be 15 or 20 minutes, but just to make sure that everybody understands what's next and what documentation is required and needed. And it works very well. It's very helpful.
And that, go ahead, Diane.
That I think really, kind of relates to the data room and how that all is progressing is most data rooms nowadays have a feature where you can turn on certain portions for certain, individuals, buyers, etc. So I would say a best practice is thinking about staging that, where the most key pieces you allow the potential buyers to see up front. And then if there is a secret sauce or maybe, something important that remain confidential, you hold on to that and you can already have it in the data room, but you don't let folks see it until further on in the process.
Yeah, one of those oftentimes is salaries of the executives will be, special password needed, etc.
That's right. Or lists even of the employees, if it's a strategic acquisition, especially because you don't want them to poach your employees if the deal falls apart.
Right.
Yeah, or key customers. Key suppliers.
Yes. And you can set notifications. I want to see the next time information comes in for financial documentation. So the notifications are highly important as well.
So in all of these transactions, before you share a single scrap of paper, and often before they even know the identity of the potential target, so the company that's being sold, there will be an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement that'll be put in place. And, they definitely will cover use of confidential information, non-disclosure of confidential information. Sometimes they will include a non-hire or non-solicitation of employees. Obviously, the sellers want that, especially if it's a strategic situation. The buyers don't necessarily love that. Although if it's a private equity buyer, usually they don't really care too much. Sometimes they will push back saying, you know, look, my portfolio companies, they, you know, in the aggregate have, let's call it 2 million employees. You know, I don't have the capacity to keep track of that. But, you know, to the extent that there is something that the sellers need to keep confidential, one way to do that is just don't give it over at the beginning.
That's a good point. This slide does address a couple of the items that Diane was just talking about with regards to NDAs and non-disclosures. We do have a question, so I'm going to interrupt the flow for a moment. From Doreen, is it customary for sellers' contractual obligation with their clients be assumed by the buyer?
So that's going to depend on the deal structure. So if we're doing if it's a stock acquisition, then yes. If it's an asset acquisition, it could be yes or it could be no. The buyer gets to choose typically if they're going to assume what contracts of the sellers that they're going to assume in an asset deal.
Yes.
Thank you. There's also a question, and I hate to ask it because it's going to open up a floodgate, but let's go ahead and do this as on SPACs, SPAC. So it's going gangbusters, haywire, you know, good vibes, bad vibes. Anybody want to comment on that?
Those are special purpose acquisition corporations. They're normally formed, I don't know if I'd call them or categorize them kind of like PE light. They generally have a lifespan anywhere between 12 months and 24 months. They're given capital. They have a list of whatever they're supposed to acquire. If they don't acquire within their designated time frame, they need to give the money back and fold up. So there's a lot of talk about them, but realistically, there are, last I knew, 270 SPACs that did a deal. So even though they're getting headlines, you know, their number count is, you know, hundreds rather than thousands.
Thanks, MaryAnne.
And they should have rep and warranty because, as Diane referenced earlier, someone referenced earlier, for an organization to go and do a capital call back is highly frowned upon. So these folks wish to have the protection, so they're good candidates for rep and warranty. From an underwriting standpoint, I would defer to Jason as to the thoroughness. They may be pretty much targeted to go get something and may or may not do all the diligence that a normative firm would generally undertake. I would proceed with caution a little bit.
Yeah, I think we've seen a couple of these come across our plate, but I think luckily it's been, as the rest of it has been, madness. So in a triage situation, we're able to put some of the riskier things towards the bottom of the pile. So I think, just frankly speaking, this is not really a path we've gone down yet. If the well starts drying up, we may have to reconsider, but for the time being, we've had plenty of other opportunities to explore.
Right.
How's that for a lawyerly answer?
Very, very much on target.
Diane, Jeff, would you like to discuss anything else on this slide, or shall we ask for the next one?
I think we can move on.
Okay. Who wants to chat about these? Do we want to talk about letters of intent? Do we want to talk about?
Well, I feel like we've touched on a lot of these so far. I don't know how you feel, Diane, but I think we've hit most of these. You know, yeah, actually, I think we've hit all of these.
It's almost, yeah, like a recap. This is, you know, there is a progression and it's very logical for those that do this for a living. I'll just point out that because rep and warranty is getting much more take up, many of us are starting to see, I'm going to call them newbies, individuals and business firms that are new to rep and warranty. So we do oftentimes need to go back to core basics and communicate again and again as to what the path is, et cetera, as new entities learn about this perhaps for the first time.
And it's very obvious to those who are in the industry who the newbies are, right? So
yes, and we applaud them for getting into the pool. We're very happy for their interest.
That's when we go, you need to talk to Diane, please.
Yes.
She's got to organize your
Little
data.
hand holding, handout, info, guidelines, consultation. Yes.
Go talk to MaryAnne. She will give you all the lists and documents and everything you need to prepare before you come back to talk to us, right?
Point them in the right direction. and then they become repeat customers, and it's all good.
Which is great. We do like that repeat customer. And there is one question I have on here that we talked about, deals varying length. Some can get concluded in 2, 3, 5 weeks, whatever, especially cash only, blah, blah, blah. Others will last for years, depending on DOJ and other regulatory approvals. What is the longest deal that Jeff maybe or Diane you've lived through, and why? What was the biggest lesson you learned from that? What made it go so long?
Yeah, I think the longest deal I worked on, it was a joint venture. So that took where we were acquiring a piece into the company. That went on for close to a year. Part of it was language because it was cross-border. The other parts were some compliance matters that came up. I think also just who's going to have operational control was the other long and lengthy discussion and negotiation. And then the other part, just the regulatory piece to it of not only the regulatory approvals, but then the bureaucratic things that needed to be filed and done to actually close. It was a very, very long and lengthy process. And inexperience for us, I would say it was a deal in the Middle East in doing acquisitions or transactions in that country.
Yeah.
I've got one right now that it's signed in November 2nd. So it signed 6 months ago. And when we placed it, we have 365 days as initially negotiated for the deal to go from signing to closing. There's a lot of, in this particular situation, there are regulations in the USA, in several European countries, and in the Asia Pacific community. So a lot of regulation, compliance, approvals, etc. I negotiated 120 days included in the normal price, and then there is an modest additional premium for every 30 days after 120. And we're hoping to get everything concluded within our 365-day window.
We didn't talk about—
it depends on jurisdictional. The more countries you have and the more complex it is, add months to finalization.
Sure. And from my perspective, so I play mostly in the lower middle market, and I do very few cross-national deals. So I would say most of my deals that really stretch on have some sort of regulatory component. I'm thinking of one where we sold a specialty pharmacy, and waiting for the regulatory approval, it just takes a little bit of time. But it was in the, I would say even that wasn't very long. It was, a handful of months, way less than 6. But having said that, it depends on what we consider the start of a deal. So a deal that I'm working on right now, we're on the sell side, and the target started talking to investment bankers 3 years ago. And I think finally with the tax environment, because I think folks expect tax rates to go up at the end of this year or for next year, they finally said, I think it's time to pull the trigger. Let's go forward. Our financials have been stable for long enough that it's time to move forward. And we're, ideally going to be closing later at the end of the month.
That's a good point.
So, yeah, one other thing that I would want to add Diane, when you were speaking, it reminded me of is some of the other deals that I've worked on that have taken a long time are because the seller isn't really sure that they want to sell. And sometimes it's a family company that was started by, by the main shareholder. And it sounds like a good idea to sell, but when it comes to put pen to paper, they have second thoughts. And some of that's because it's been their life's work. And other times it's been their life's work and they have no idea what they're going to do next. And that's a scary proposition for somebody who's shown up to the same office for the last 40, 50 years and run a company and started a company from nothing to something where they're getting paid millions and millions of, sometimes billions of dollars.
Seller's remorse.
I do want to hit on the topic of culture, right? And so this idea of the seller wanting to sell, but they don't know what to do, or the idea of a joint venture in the Middle East requires a certain level of cultural sensitivity. Any other lessons learned from working with cross-border, or just even within a U.S. domestic, there could be a cultural difference between two industries trying to team up. Any kind of fun stories you like to relay?
I think the cultural piece is huge, and empathy goes a long way. So there was a deal that I worked on many years ago in Germany, where the headquarters was in Germany, but they had locations around the world. And it was a woman, she was the sole shareholder, had taken over the company in the 60s, I think. In the 50s or 60s, I can't remember, but her dad started the company, he died young. And so she took over the company and ran it and did an excellent job growing it to a tremendous amount of size to where we were very interested in acquiring it, and for a couple €100 million. And but she was very tough, and her own legal team did not like working with her. We went over to negotiate with her, and I felt like my sole job was to make sure I connect with this woman, get her to trust me, because we're coming from this big publicly traded multinational company that's billions and billions in annual revenue, and she runs this family company in Germany. And so after a few days of negotiating, we had really struck a good rapport. And as we were walking out, she gave me a hug, and even her own lawyers were amazed that she would show any emotion like that whatsoever. And she told me that she thought we would be this big scary company and we would be rude and just push her around. And she appreciated our tact and how we negotiated with her.
Jeff, wonderful words. I live by the mantra of cultural empathy and just sensitivity in general. And just because we're in America doesn't mean we're always right. Let's just say that out loud.
That's right.
And one of the things that many of the deal makers and coordinators have discussed over the last 12 months has been the point that Jeff has said, meeting the buyer, meeting the seller, and their team members all having face-to-face communications, et cetera. That's been impinged with COVID because some organizations are hesitant to travel and some have a prohibition. So doing it electronically is far different than in person. But I think that personal touch goes a long way, because there have been multiple sessions at various PE, M&A transaction seminars where it talks about everything looks rosy, but then the integration just hits a wall and it doesn't go anywhere near as well as planned, because a lot of the coordinators and deal makers get it all set up and then they move on to do big game hunting for something else, and it transitions to another set of people, and transactions and transitions may or may not go as planned. So it's very important and should probably continue to get high level involvement because it is very important.
MaryAnne, I think that's a great segue. Oh, I'm sorry, Jason, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think on the underwriting side, I would say a good portion of the deals we see have at least some element of rollover. which to Jeff's point, their life's work. These guys don't want to hand it over 100%. So you're definitely seeing a lot of the rollover, which I think makes everyone more comfortable. From our perspective, we know the sellers are staying on to hand over the business. They're not going to turn over a pile of junk to the new buyers. And it keeps the sellers involved in their business that they've had for so long. So, I mean, we're definitely seeing upticks in rollover percentages.
Appreciate that. Mark, if you could go to the next slide. I think I want to go to integration, right? So we know, statistically speaking, it's been proven, HBR, others are out there, cultural fit, sellers staying on to some extent generally make the integration process smoother. Quicker integrations tend to, according to the literature, seem to be more successful rather than prolonged. What other words of wisdom might you have on integrating?
So from my perspective, it takes having some of that core deal team to stick with the deal post-closing. And while there is the due diligence report that you can pass on to the new operating team, you learn many things going through the entire process of the transaction that come up, that you learn about the company. And if you're able to participate and to support the new operations team, they will get up to speed a heck of a lot faster. If issues come up, they're taken care of a lot easier. A lot of issues I've seen in the past that get raised by the new operating team, they then go back to maybe to the seller or to people working in the business that they've acquired, and they think it's a huge issue, but that's already been covered in diligence and it wasn't. And so you're putting out a fire that shouldn't have been a fire in the first place. The other part of the diligence piece that's huge to integration is understanding, will this be a cultural fit? And that's hard. And I think a lot of companies on the acquisition side, they just they don't want to spend the money on that and figuring out whether it's a cultural fit. They look strictly at the numbers and, how's this going to go? And what you will see post-closing is a lot of people leaving from the target company. That just happens because they are not a cultural fit. And that ends up being, more times than not, a deal that doesn't turn out so well.
And I would say that's probably more common on the PE-led rather than the strategics.
I don't know. I've seen it both in the strategic side myself and on the PE side.
So I'll say that, if the buyer and the seller can't get along during the process, and I'm not saying that, folks shouldn't take whatever positions, even if they're aggressive positions in the course of negotiations, that's all fine. But if they're really butting heads and the idea is that, management is going to stay on after the fact and the buyer just can't get along with management during the sale process, it's not going to get better once the deal is consummated. I mean, that would be like if you're constantly fighting when you're engaged, it's not going to get better once you're married.
Correct.
And so, if you get into a situation where that happens, I think it's best to think about whether this is really going to be a good partnership going forward.
Yeah, look, I mean, the reason one of the companies I worked for, we never kept the management really around was because they were going from a small company where they made all the decisions to a large company where they would probably not make many decisions and they'd have to, listen to what the corporate team had to say. That never worked out. Somebody who's been their own boss doesn't typically like to go have 17 different bosses after that.
Yeah, so cultural fit is definitely one of the major factors that that needs to be considered within the due diligence. I have not seen it be a topic in a data room. Let me just say it that way.
No.
I wonder if maybe that should be at some point, right?
It's the pink elephant in the room.
Right. So let's do psychoanalytical exams on those key employees that we want to keep now. I don't know, maybe it's a trend, guys, but so integration hinges on cultural fit as well as all of these harder factors, right? Another one that I was presenting with the treasurer earlier this week, she mentioned things that are, back to your point, Jeff, if you're on Oracle and they're on SAP, that's going to be a hard fit. If you have, 3 banks and they've got 25, that's another, just the mechanicals of some of these issues, right? Anything else that lessons learned or on an integration or any of these kind of closing phases?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think a lot of the post-closing covenants, and Diane mentioned this earlier, when you're a buyer, you want to limit those as much as possible. So I've been a part of some deals where the seller wants us to guarantee that we're not going to, cut headcount. That's a really hard one to agree to as a buyer, because you could have 2008, 2009 happen, right? I mean, and we keep thousands of employees in this business that's failing. That just, it puts a lot of handcuffs on how you operate. So you try to stay away from things like that as much as possible. I would just say, in general, I'm not a fan of earnouts, whether I'm on the buy side or the sell side, because it is inevitably an argument. It doesn't matter how clearly you think you have defined all the categories. That is a real pain in the butt. Nobody ever agrees, especially the seller that doesn't get anything on those earnouts, because they are expecting it. No matter how many times you tell them it's variable or conditional or whatever, they're planning on getting some of that. And then I think the other piece is any type of transaction where the seller is going to be retaining any kind of control. So maybe you're not buying 100%, you're buying less than that. That's a real pain. That means they are really just holding on to stay. And we've had a situation in the past where we kept a seller around to work with us, mostly out of just courtesy, because he was elderly and he just kept showing up and causing problems. And then his consulting agreement was done and he just kept showing up and being more and more difficult. He just never wanted to leave. And that's another reason of not retaining those.
Yeah, like you said, it's hard to walk away sometimes, especially if you've done that. It's your life work, and
Yep.
50, 60 years, whatever. So
And then on the flip side, when you have a seller who just wants to go to the beach, sometimes they change their mind after they've been at the beach for sometimes a shockingly short period of time. So there are these things called restrictive covenants, which, often include non-competes, non-solicits. I would say market standard is usually that they go for 5 years. And I'm sure that when Jeff acquires a company, especially if he intends not to retain management and management are sellers, then he that's a key component of the deal.
Yes, for sure.
that's a good point. Mark has removed the slides. I just want to give a little reminder to everybody. You should go back into Link to Lloyd's, I believe, to go ahead and register that you've participated for your CE credits. This is audience, your turn to, if there are any lingering questions that you haven't had a chance to ask, this is your turn to chime in. Otherwise, while you guys do that, I'm going to ask the final question, unless others have a topic we want to talk about we haven't yet discussed. I kind of warned you guys, words of wisdom. So panel members, thank you so much. I find this topic engaging. I find you an engaging group of panelists, and thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and your wisdom and your expertise with the audience. I hope to see more of this in the future. My next question for you and last question for you is, what words of wisdom or advice might you give to your audience in terms of creating a better M&A deal, however you define better, right? Who wants to take that first?
Start early, be thorough. Have realistic expectations.
Diane?
Yeah, mine was along the same line. Bring in specialists early. A lawyer is obviously key If you don't have audited financials and you're on the sell side, bring in a financial expert to, clean up your books, really review them. Really, you know what your weaknesses are, and to the extent that you have them, come up with a plan for how to get through those. And don't try to do it all yourself. Let folks help you. It's well worth the additional cost.
Good advice, Jeff, Jason.
So, along those lines, I will say you got to know what you're good at and what you're not, and what capacity you really have. And so everybody's busy. And so, yes, bring in professionals, I think, is a great advice, and early and often. But deals they sound sexy, but it is a lot of grunt work, a lot of grinding. And so while it may seem really interesting to do, if you're not grinding it out, you're going to have a costly mistake. And so whether you have insurance or good indemnities or not, you're just not going to hit the model that you thought. You're not going to have the expectations that you thought you would get out of that acquisition. So you really got to grind it out.
Yeah, I think mine's in line with everything. I mean, it's us as the underwriter job to ask questions. The more thorough the process, even the more later in the process that you bring us on, the easier our side is. Reduce long lists of follow-ups or many exclusions, because we're going to ask the questions and we're going to need answers in order to get the coverage that the deal requires.
I want to thank everybody very, very much for the advice, for your thoughts. And in closing, I don't know what your personal statistics are, but I'd say, 40-50% of the deals that we work on might conclude. So back to Jeff's point, that they sound sexy, but there's a lot of work. There's a lot of people's time. There's a lot of money spent around these, and not all of them conclude. And that's probably better, right? That it gets identified earlier or not. So for those of you who have interest in this industry or in this segment of the industry, absolutely feel free to write to any one of us or reach out, check out the articles. And we look forward to having you on. The next Association of Lloyd's discussion is actually going to be in August. And it's going to be on high net worth individuals and property coverage. So a completely different topic, because we are Lloyd's and we are flexible. So look forward to that discussion coming in August on the 19th. Please go ahead and sign up. Again, CE credits will be provided. I don't know if Mark or Mary want to chime in with any parting words. Otherwise, I just wanted to, again, thank you very, very much, panel. Jeff, Jason, Diane, MaryAnne, thank you so much. And thank you to my teams and my friends who have been out there supporting. Appreciate you. Any other words?
I'll just offer one thing. It's just an easy way to remember what rep and warranty does and does not intend to cover. And it's the old Donald Rumsfeld known unknowns situation. So if it's a known situation, it's not covered. The known knowns need to be negotiated in the deal. If it's a known unknown, like that there's pollution, about it, you just don't know the quantum. That needs to be handled separately. What rep and warranty does provide protection for are the unknown unknowns. So it's a good way to just categorize it. Rep and warranty is for the unknown unknowns. The diligence will have fleshed out all sorts of other facts and figures that can be dealt with. And that's my parting point.
Thank you, MaryAnne. Okay, so be safe, be well, and we'll see you in August. And thank you, everybody, very, very much. We appreciate you. Take care.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.